I'm Andrew Tudor, certified financial planner, run an independent financial planning firm with my brother Fred, and I currently reside in North Carolina. So, Fred, I'll kick it over to you.
I am the brother Fred. Currently live in Cincinnati, Ohio. Been on this journey with Andrew 3 years this month. It's been a great journey. Excited to have this conversation with Dr. Jerika Ross, just to hear more of how these two worlds intersect. So, go ahead, introduce yourself, Jerika, for all those interested viewers.
Yes, those. Hopefully, I can't see anyone's faces, but I know that you're out there. So, I'm Jerika Ross. I'm a psychologist, and I live in Tennessee, but I kind of see people all over the U.S. And my specialty is health psychology. So looking at the intersection between how our physical health impacts our mind and vice versa. And money is definitely one of those things. So I feel very grateful to be invited to this conversation. In terms of how I got to my role, didn't choose psychology initially. I come from a family in the medical field and wanted to be there, but didn't want to deal with blood and guts. So kind of transitioned eventually over into mental health, and most of us have mental health that runs in our families. And so when I actually took a look at it, I had several mental health issues in our family history. And so took a psychology course, loved it, and have been very grateful for the opportunity to ask our questions about how we live, what we do, what we choose to do, and why. And so that's what got me here. Yeah.
Awesome. And we're glad you're here. And I'm sure patients are glad that you're here.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, we work with people across the gamut, young professionals and pre-retirees and some retired folks. One of the things we noticed is that a lot of our favorite clients, a lot of our best clients also had therapists that they saw on a regular basis. When we do their budget, they budgeting money for therapy. So how would you describe the relationship between mental health and financial health?
Yeah. I think on the basic level, most people can understand that your finances dictate your stress level and how you're managing it. But when I talk to clients, we tend to go a little bit deeper. So money is it's really an inanimate object that we assign a particular value and a purpose and a meaning towards it. And so if you really want to understand who a person is, go look at their budget or go look at where they spent. If you were to look at the highest budget item on my list, it would be food, right? And so pleasure, food, what does that mean to you? And is it that you're hoarding a lot of food? Is it that you're storing a lot away? Are you emotionally eating? And so on the basic level, money can represent what you value, but on a larger scale is also tied into your identity. And so how do I see myself? What's the story that my money tells me? And what is the history that comes with it? So everyone has a story about money and what it meant growing up. What does it say about where you are now? I'm not where I said I thought I'd be at this point. It's so funny. Now I'm thinking about it. I remember when I was a senior in high school, we wrote out cards of where we thought we'd be in 10 years. Almost everyone thought they were going to be a millionaire. We had no concept of time and how much we were going to be able to make. But it is this idea that we tie money towards an identity. And so if you're unsure about who you are, you're probably going to be unsure about your finances and where they are, or there's always a constant struggle to get to somewhere else. And so if you can start to clarify who you are, then you start to put a little bit more order into how you manage your finances. So it's not just about whether I have it or I don't. Not having it mean something. Having access to it gives me a conduit by which I express my identity. Yeah.
I think one thing you said that we agree with is if you look at where someone spends their money, it usually equates to their values. And we do a values exercise with our clients.
Yes.
And we do pose the question, how does this show up in your spending, right? And a lot of times we don't go back and say, okay, we see where you spend, like it doesn't, like values aren't here, right? But just thinking through the intersection of values and spending and how that all correlates with if it's not in line and there's some stress and there's some anxiety, like what do you do? How do you approach helping your clients get to the other side of that?
Yeah. So I think it's clarifying what is out of order, right? So the awareness has to be there first. What about me is not showing up in what I do? in our heads, they should match, but human behavior is anything but predictable, right? And so usually there's another element that we haven't considered that's blocking the manifestation of who we want to be. And so it's really getting at the anxiety that we're responding to. So when people are really having the struggle between who I am versus where I want to be, there are so many different layers of what could be causing that gap. If you're able to get to the root of that, it decreases the distance between who I am and what I want to be. So it's one, taking inventory, not only about what I value, but what is the, how do I honor that value? And is that realistic? So what do I practically do on a day-to-day basis to say that? So if my value is health, how is it that you honor this value on a day-to-day basis? You work out, do you watch what you eat, so on and so forth. We're talking about money, right? The same thing. If I see myself as fiscally responsible, how does that look tangibly? And if I don't have the behavior that matches, what is the anxiety or what is the barrier that's drawing that pulls me away from that? So being able to ask the harder question, that why question, sometimes people can't see it. And then obviously that's a great point in time to ask for some help. Yeah.
Are there specific behaviors when you're trying to connect the two that, I guess, across the board you'd want to see in clients, like certain behaviors, certain habits that'll help influence like the mental health in relation to money, or not, but in relation to mental health and money? What kind of behaviors or habits are you trying to have your clients exhibit?
I think the hardest one, and I say this to everybody, I think the hardest human behavior to exhibit is consistency. How well can I do the same thing again and again and again? And when I don't, what does that say about me? Do I attribute it to a character flaw? Do I attribute it to something that's just impossible, or some personal deficit? So the harder thing is to be consistent. What I encourage people to do, particularly about money, is to find the one thing that you can control, right? And so that literally might just start with the budget, right? Can I outline where I'm seeing my money go? It's not, my Dave Ramsey's coming up, but it's not the amount of money that you make, it's how you manage it, right? It really is about recognizing your choices and feeling empowered with those choices. Yes, money gives us access, but more of what people really want is choice. I want to be able to choose what I want to do, not only with this money, but what I want to do with my life. And when they do that, they can have freedom. That's really the root of it, is I want to be free with what I do. And so in order to have that freedom, I need to be able to choose. And so finding one area in which you can't control would be, it starts to build the blocks of helping you to have access and power. And that does, roll into the next thing. So financially, we have the budget. Some of these things you two are familiar with, right? Operating in cash, that like the tangible cash, and seeing every dollar go out. Psychologically, I can see the weight of every choice in that moment. And if we have that immediate feedback, we're like, I don't know. I know when I was in grad school and McDonald's came up with the dollar menu, I would like, that's 5 cheeseburgers that I could have me that whole week. We're always living in poverty if you're in grad school. So that's 5 cheeseburgers. And it's different if I'm using $1 versus swiping the card, right? I'm trying to think about another behavior. So budget for awareness, money, accountability is the biggest piece. Everybody should have somebody that you're talking to about money, right? That this is what I'm doing, where I'm going. And when people call you out, I thought you didn't have any money, but I see you going to Cabo. I swear everybody's going to Cabo right now. Like, having people to call you out is for your health. It isn't for criticism, but it's to hold you accountable. And I would say maybe lastly, a really good habit is to have the vision, right? To keep the vision about really where you want to go, and tying a timeline to it. If I do blah, 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 then I can get here on this date. So you need smaller goals, because the smaller goals reinforce you towards the bigger ones. If you can see it and you start to meet it little by little, you're more likely to achieve it. And psychologically, that's what the research shows. If I can actually envision, sometimes we have people stop, I'll have people do some guided imagery. Like, I actually I need you to see it in your head about where you're trying to go. And so we'll do some practice together with that.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good, because, in our industry, we talk about really imagining your future self. That a lot of times it can feel like when I'm saving or not spending on the things I want, that I'm taking away from myself.
Yeah.
And if you can have a really good mental image, really think through future self, no matter what age that is, 50, 70, whatever, and you really come to terms with that person, you start to think that one day I will be here, and start doing your future self favors and start saving for your future self, start working out so that that future self has mobility, all of those things really come around. So that mental imagery really makes sense and seems to be kind of overlap in our industry.
Yeah. And people don't think that it's possible. And I think that's the saddest piece, is that one, people stop dreaming, and two, they question if it's possible. And if anything, if we negate the possibilities of what is, if we stop dreaming, then we also see things dwindle in terms of our finances, right? You have to be able to keep the dream. And so sometimes that means you need to be inspired. Find somebody who looks like you, who's doing what you're doing, and make it more realistic. That this actually is possible. But, the pressures of our society is that we want it very quickly. I don't think that building wealth is as an anomaly, and two, as far-fetched. Like, it feels like a fairy tale. It really is some basic behavior done consistently. But our humanness, right? Our humanness and our drive for either the moment, or I've done this for so long, and it's one step forward, two steps back, right? That this is the story of my life. And here's where identity comes in again, right? But something just always happens to me, and I can just never get ahead. It's not as far-fetched, but our beliefs about what we're capable of doing based on our life circumstances. And then I would say, as a deeper question, the story that we have about our own lives, really stunts people in their growth. Right?
Yeah, the stories we tell ourselves. That makes a lot of sense. And I love how you said when we were younger, we aspired to billionaire status, right? I don't even know. I think when we were young, it was like millionaire, right? Now it's like, these 9 billionaires. I'm going to be one of those when I grow up. What role do you think not only mindfulness, but also just self-awareness play in how we can achieve balance in our lives when it comes to money, or when it comes to just identity? How does that show up?
I heard something not long ago, maybe like 6 or 7 months ago, that I took out the word balance, and I'm using harmony. And the difference being that balance gives the idea that we can place equal time and attention into every category, and that's just impossible, right? Harmony highlights the idea that my finger is on every area that's important, but I have to put more time and attention into certain categories at certain seasons of my life. Right. And so instead of trying to get a balance in each area, it's about having harmony. So these things are important. Perhaps, child rearing is more important right now. And I need to make sure that whatever financial resources I'm putting in are going to be to build my children. Maybe it's retirement. I'm in this stage where I'm not taking care of anybody else. So I really need to focus on that. And so being aware, again, the awareness is, I would say, statistically, the biggest predictor of your financial success. If I understand what I'm doing, I'm holding myself accountable first and foremost. So it's being mindful, and then again, attaching every behavior to be intentional, right? So every dollar that I'm spending or investing, I'm being intentional about it. What is the intention behind this move that I'm making? Where is this investment going? And what am I hoping that it develops into in the future? And there are just certain seasons that we're going to be placing more energy into one area versus the other, but they're all important, right? And so I think one is being aware, but also finding out, where do I need to be placing more energy into in this season? And then as I do, be very intentional about every move that I make. Yeah.
I think the awareness piece it's a big one, especially in our space. And I bring it up, I probably brought it up twice yesterday, because we meet with clients, and when we're trying to get an understanding or set some goals around spending, we're fully aware that it's not going to happen overnight, right? But what usually does happen within the first few weeks or the first few months is you become more aware of what you are spending. And oh man, I spent more there than I thought I did. But this time when I'm spending it, like I'm thinking through it, like, oh man, like do I really want to keep spending money here?
Yeah.
And so when we set goals for clients, it's with the understanding that it's not going to happen overnight, but what will happen is you'll become more aware. And thinking through setting goals, one thing you mentioned was smaller goals that kind of roll into big goals.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other emotional pieces or just mental health pieces, or like how can people approach it from the mindset of being emotionally healthy and when they're setting goals that kind of tie into money or just in general?
Yeah. Yeah. I think about your conceptualization about what money actually is. So we've talked about this a little bit of um, it is an inanimate object that we assign high value to. Um, but my definition of a dollar is different than somebody else's definition of a dollar. My definition of a dollar in grad school is much different than the definition of a dollar if somebody is coming to me for a fundraiser now, right? Like, oh, of course you could have a dollar. In grad school, that may not have been the answer. Like, that means something different, right? And so reassessing like your value of a dollar and what it actually is could be very helpful with developing another strategy with managing it and how you feel about the money. Um, really money is a tool. And what I love about the assessment piece, the value piece that you two do is that I always tell my clients emotionally that you can't tame what you don't name. So essentially I need to give it an identity before I can actually manage it. And so that's the same thing with our emotions. If this dollar means something to me, give me the name of it. What is the name of it? Okay. I feel, the first one that comes to my mindset is poverty, right? Like I just don't have enough, right? It's a poverty mindset. We hear that quite often, right? Okay. So this is a tool that means that I don't have enough, right? And so what does that actually mean? What is the deeper attachment to not having enough? Also, what would be enough, right? What is it that you have that's within your resources to amplify? And so I'm a woman of faith, and I think that looking at this from a position of faith is incredibly helpful too. Is that actually this is written in the Bible that money is a tool, right? It's a tool for defense. It's a tool for other things. It's a tool to give you access and to do things throughout the earth. But if I don't understand my relationship with the tool, then I make the tool in charge of me rather than me being in charge of it. So it's a way to weaponize it to your disposal. I needed to behave the way that I would need it to behave. And I can't tame it unless I call it out for what it is. So you have to be very careful about understanding your value to the dollar. So if anything, I'd say, in terms of additional tools psychologically is understanding what that dollar means, understand what is that you want it to do for you. And then we set the smaller goals. Yes, you can have the smaller goals in mind, but also don't forget the vision. Don't forget the vision longer term. It's just amazing to see what consistency will get you. I know I have my title, but really the only difference between me and somebody else is that I just kept going. I just showed up, did another paper. I did a lot of papers. I did another presentation, but I did it. Anytime we define somebody as an expert, is that they did it consistently over time. And so, money feels so intimidating. Then we start with something very small, right? How many times did you eat out this week? Instead of 5, cut it back to 4, right? So you just find like one thing that you start to tell yourself about what can be cultivated. So, I'm just not this person. It's an inaccurate statement, right? You just haven't had the opportunity to cultivate it until you're aware that it's an issue. And so now that it's here, let's whip it into shape. So I don't think I quite answered the question, but it was kind of a pulling together some things that we talked about.
I think you did. And I don't know if you know, but you're talking Fred's love language, which is consistency.
Yes.
There's probably a book coming out at some point about discipline and consistency from Fred.
Yeah.
Because that's what we see as well. And it's interesting that we find ourselves helping people through spending challenges and getting out of debt.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we have our math-minded clients that say, shouldn't I be paying off my highest interest rate first, right? Isn't that mathematically the best way to pay down debt? And we let them know you can do the avalanche or the snowball, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
But psychologically, having wins faster, paying off,
Yes.
paying off the $700 credit card before you go after the $5,000 credit
Yep.
card, before we go after that $15,000 credit
Yeah.
card,
Yeah.
is psychologically, from a goal setting standpoint, what's higher success rate. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we have to force ourselves to be consistent while the habit builds, and that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
ways we can do it.
Yeah. I'd like to add a couple of things to that. Motivation is not linear. So while we think that it is, there's no human behavior in which our motivation is just linear. There are times we call them slips and surges. There are times where you're going to have a surge of motivation and then you're going to drop off. Like, I'm just so tired, or, I really want that thing. I've been waiting for it for a long time. And so you're going to have these slips and surges. The goal is not to allow the slips to last too long and to get back on track. And then, if we're talking about budget, we're allowing us an opportunity in the budget, right? Sometimes some play money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly, I think this is important for married couples, making sure you have the allowance to play, right? That again, we're coming back to choice. I want to choose what I want to do with this play money, right? And even if you're single, you need to have some play money on the side. That way you're not feeling deprived, and then it keeps you motivated to move towards those other goals, right? Make it in reason. We can go overboard with it, but motivation's not linear. So don't beat yourself up about it if you happen to slip. We just don't want the slip to last very long. And then we learn from the slips, right? What was I really yearning for in that slip? Okay, well, let me make sure that I account for that somewhere in my budget. But yeah, consistency is the hardest thing. I guess that's what made me think, why is this so difficult? It's just motivation's just not linear. I really didn't get motivated until I got mad at it. It's like, yeah,
Mad at it.
I got mad at it.
Say more about that though. What was that like for you? Like you said, you got mad at it. What was that?
I felt taken advantage of, and I've never been one who likes to be in that position. Like, oh, they got one over on me. Primarily student loans. It's like, when I looked at the amount I took out versus the interest, and didn't really understand at the time. I knew there was going to be more than what I took out, right, in terms of what I would pay back. But the impact of that over years, I got mad at it. I was like, oh, this is going away. It's going away right now. So much so that I don't really like to pay anything per month. If I can pay it all up front, I'll pay it all up front. Cell phone, any equipment. Like, I'm gonna give you all your money right now, because what I don't want is this hanging over my head, and I don't want to pay that interest about what I owe. I just got really angry at that. So.
I think one thing you said that makes sense, and I think is healthy when you talk to other people. You mentioned slips and surges. I think it's important to give yourself permission, right, to slip sometimes, so you're not like beating yourself, and understand like it's gonna happen.
Yep.
But not only understanding it's gonna happen, like just give yourself permission, like, oh, that's okay. Like once I get out of it, 2 steps forward again, right? But I think that translates to a lot of different things, in which we only know what we know, as far as money, right? We have our own money mindset. Is how we do it. Like our experiences from then till now.
Yeah.
You don't really know that there are different ways that are okay, that you can give yourself permission to just let things happen. So
I was going to say, are there any, because one of the things you said very early that resonated with me was the story you tell yourself matters. And like Fred said, I slip. Am I telling myself a story that I'm just undisciplined and I can't do this? Or did I have a bad day or a bad few days? How can people reframe what the story is that they tell themselves? Like, are there any tools? Telling yourself a better story.
Context is key. Context is everything. We tend to navigate towards the story that feels most comfortable when we're scared. It's more familiar. So when we're afraid, or if this is something new, we tend to go back to the old narrative much easier, right? Than being able to look at it as, oh, I've never been here before. Let me figure it out, right? Let me strategize a different way. In psychology, part of how we measure intelligence is flexibility. How well can you solve the problem? So you come up against a barrier. How cognitively flexible are you with it to find an alternative route? And so rather than saying that look, I just don't have it, because that's a familiar narrative, then I say, oh, okay, I messed up here. What is it about this context that I didn't get? And if I run into this context again and again, then how do I end up here rather than a different story, right? Mm-hmm. So it's much more about believing about who you're building rather than staying in a narrative that's unproductive, and there's no growth that can come from that, right? So we're solving all the time. Actually, I was listening to something this morning before I got going. And maybe it's just a thing for me this whole week. Actually, no, I would say it is a thing. It is a thing. The only constant in life is change, right? There's so much movement. As human beings, we want something very finite and secure. We want financial security, but we also have an idea that it's a set position until you get there. And it's like, oh, that's not enough. And then you want something else, and then it moves. There is no set place where we are totally content, because life is always evolving. We're evolving as human beings. So things are in constant movement. But I think there is some stability in how I manage it, right? We just have to be willing. This is pulling back the mindfulness piece. One of the principles of mindfulness is that I'm willing to take the moment as it comes, right? And so that's what we have to do. We have to be willing to accept the moment, but consider it in context, because we're always changing. The hope is that you're growing, not just changing, that you're growing and evolving, but it's never a set thing all the time. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. There's a study that said, when it comes to financial wellness, mm-hmm. the question, or your response to the question, I can handle whatever comes at me financially, on a scale from 1 to 5, the higher you are on the answer to that question, the better you are situated for financial wellness. Mm-hmm. And that it actually doesn't change based on how much money you have. There are people who have a lot of money who still feel that they cannot handle what comes at them financially. And there are people who would be lower net worth, maybe lower income, to those who answer higher, and they actually do better over time, and they, can navigate the world and their finances in a better place. So that's what we call that.
I love that because it's not about the money. It's the mindset.
Not about the money.
It's not about the money, right? I can have little, but I know how to grind. I know how to get it.
And I'll be okay.
I've been without. There's no way that I'm gonna go without, right? And then from a place of security, I'm afraid about losing. That I'm just gonna, if I lose it, I won't be okay. And so it's a very telling question. When I would love.
yeah, it's good. So I as we wrap, thank you so much. I mean, if there was an audience live, they would be standing up and clapping.
Yeah.
We have to shush them right now, because this was really, really good. As we wrap, we'll be those people.
Oh, thanks. It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. As we wrap, anything you want to add, or any place that we can find you or follow, or anything on top of what we just done?
Yeah. So my website is therapy419.com. If you're ever looking for me, you can shoot me a message on there. My email is on there. You can email me. I also accept text. You can text me on there. But otherwise, I'm just here. So it was great having a conversation with you two. Love your work. If no one else is working with them, you should. They're very psychologically oriented. So it's like therapy, honestly, to work with you two. It doesn't feel like, we're just talking about money, right? So I appreciate you for being who you are, both of you. Yeah.
We appreciate you. And if you want to find us, this will be live on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching there and you want to find us, alchemistwealth.com, and feel free to sign up for our newsletter. Feel free to schedule some time if you want to have a conversation and really go deeper on not only making good financial decisions, but also getting the most out of your money and doing it in a really I was going to say balanced, but I'm going to start saying harmonious.
Harmonious. There you go.
in a more harmonious way. So thank everybody for listening. Thanks to all the folks who commented, and have a good rest of your day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed that video, be sure to subscribe. If you want to learn more about how we serve our clients, visit our website at www.alchemistwealth.com.
On the way to being free.